You're not the owner of this house anymore, so your opinion means nothing." Olivia yelled this while she moved my furniture from one side to the other, as if I were invisible. My daughter-in-law was standing in the middle of my living room, her arms crossed, with a look of contempt I never imagined would be directed at me. I had just asked her why she was changing everything without consulting me. It was a simple question, a calm one, but her response was a direct blow to the chest. He stood still, my hands trembling at my sides. 67 years I've carried this life, and now a woman who arrived in my family just 5 years ago was telling me I had no right to an opinion in the house I built, in the walls I raised, in the home where I raised my son alone after his father died. I looked at Michael, my son, my only son. He was sitting on the sofa, his gaze fixed on his phone, as if nothing was happening, as if he hadn't heard his wife humiliate me, as if I wasn't there, broken, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he said nothing. He just swiped his finger across his phone screen, avoiding my eyes. I felt something inside me shatter. It wasn't the first time Olivia had spoken to me like that, but it was the first time she'd done it in front of Michael, and he didn't react. It was the first time I understood that my son had chosen, and he hadn't chosen me. Olivia kept talking, but I wasn't listening to her words anymore. I just saw her mouth moving, full of venom. I watched her drag my armchair toward the corner, the same armchair where I nursed Michael when he was a baby, the same one where I held him when he had nightmares, the same one where I cried alone the day I buried my husband. And now it was just an obstacle in her new decor. I took a deep breath. I felt the air struggle to enter my lungs. My chest ached, not my heart, my soul. From that place where we store the love we gave, believing it would one day be returned. "You're not going to say anything, Michael." My voice came out broken, almost a whisper. I needed my son to look at me, to react, to remember who I was, who I had been for him. Michael looked up for a second, just 1 second, and then he looked down again. "Mom, don't start. Olivia is just organizing. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal." Those 5 words finished destroying me. It was not a big deal that I was yelled at. It was not a big deal that I was treated like a stranger. It was not a big deal that my existence was being erased from my own home. Olivia smiled. It was a small smile, but I saw it. It was the smile of someone who has just won, of someone who knows they have the power. And I, in that moment, had nothing. "Eleanor, if you don't like how we do things here, you can go live somewhere else. No one is forcing you to stay." Those words fell like stones. I stared at her, feeling every syllable embed itself in my chest. Leave? My house? The house I bought with the life insurance money from my husband? The house where I poured every drop of sweat so we would never lack for anything? I couldn't believe it. But there it was. Reality was hitting me without mercy. Michael was still silent. And that silence hurt more than any shout, because his silence was his answer. His silence told me he agreed. That to him I was disposable. Olivia continued moving things. She took the picture off the wall, the one with my mother's photo. She leaned it on the floor, face down, as if it were worthless, as if my history didn't matter. "That picture has been there since I bought this house," I said, trying to stay calm. "Well, it's not going to be there anymore. It doesn't match the style we want." "We want," she said, "we," as if this house belonged to both of them, as if I no longer existed in the equation. I felt my legs tremble. I wanted to scream. I wanted to let out everything I had inside. But I didn't. Because something inside me stopped me. Something I didn't quite understand yet, but that told me this was not the moment to explode. I just stood there, watching Olivia rearrange my life without my permission, watching my son look the other way, watching my world fall apart in silence. And then, without another word, I turned and walked to my bedroom. I closed the door softly. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands on my knees, trying to process what had just happened. The tears began to fall. Silent. Hot. Bitter. How had I gotten here? How had I allowed this to happen? At what point did I stop being the respected mother and become a burden? I looked around my room. It was the only place that still felt like mine. The walls with the photos of Michael as a child. The dresser with my mother's locket. The quilt I'd hand-stitched during the sleepless nights after I was widowed. Everything was still there. But I no longer felt like the owner of anything. I heard laughter in the living room. Olivia and Michael were laughing, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just torn me apart. I wiped the tears with the back of my hand. I breathed deep, and in that moment, something inside me changed. It wasn't rage, it wasn't hate. It was clarity. I understood that I could no longer wait for Michael to react, that I could no longer beg for a place in my own home, that I could no longer be invisible. If they wanted to play dirty, I was going to play smart. I got up from the bed and walked to the small desk in the corner of my room. I opened the drawer and took out an old notebook. I opened it to a blank page, and I started to write. Date, time, what Olivia had said, what Michael hadn't said, everything. Because if life had taught me anything, it's that the truth always needs proof. And I was going to have all the proof I needed. I closed the notebook and put it back in the bottom of the drawer, under some old letters. No one would look for it there. I sat back on the bed, this time without tears, just with a cold determination I had never felt before. Olivia had said I was no longer the owner of this house. But she was wrong. I was the owner, and even though it seemed like I had lost in that moment, they had no idea what was coming. Because a wounded mother is dangerous, and a betrayed mother is unstoppable. I couldn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling of my room, remembering how I had gotten here, how this house, these walls, this roof, had been my biggest dream, and how they were now becoming my worst nightmare. I closed my eyes and went back in time, to when everything was different, to when I was different. I was 32 years old when I was widowed. Michael was barely 7. I remember the day of my husband's funeral like it was yesterday. The sky was gray, and I held my son's hand while he cried, not understanding why his daddy wasn't coming back. I wasn't crying right then. I couldn't. Because I knew if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. And I had to be strong. For him, the first few months were hell. The life insurance money arrived after 3 exhausting months of paperwork. $50,000. It was a lot of money for me, who had never had more than $200 together in my life. But I didn't touch it. I didn't spend it on unnecessary things. I guarded it like it was gold. I worked cleaning houses, 3 houses a day, 6 days a week. I got up at 5 in the morning and came home at 8 at night. Michael stayed with the neighbor, Mrs. Ruth, who was the only person I could trust. She watched him, fed him, helped him with his homework, and she never charged me a cent. She just told me that one day I would do the same for someone else. I saved every dollar I could. I ate once a day so Michael could eat 3 times. I wore the same clothes for years. I didn't go out. I didn't have fun. Nothing existed except work and saving. Because I had a dream. I wanted to buy a house, a home of our own where Michael could grow up safe, where no one could ever kick us out. It took me 12 years. 12 years of absolute sacrifice. But I did it. I gathered $35,000 of my own savings, plus the $50,000 from the insurance I had invested carefully, $85,000 in total. And with that, I bought this house. I remember the day I signed the papers. It was the happiest day of my life after Michael's birth. The agent handed me the keys, and I held them in my hands like they were a treasure. Because they were. They were the proof that all the pain had been worth it. Michael was 19 when we moved in. He was in college, studying business administration. I was so proud of him. My son, the first in the family to go to college, the one who was going to have a better life than mine, the one who would never have to clean other people's houses to survive. I gave him the best room in the house, the one with the big window and the view of the yard. I painted the walls the color he wanted. I bought a new bed, a new desk, everything to make him comfortable, so he could study in peace. I took the small room, the one that faced the backyard, but I didn't care. What mattered was that my son had the best. It was always like that. Him first. Me later. Or never. Michael graduated with honors. He got a job at an accounting firm. He was earning good money. For the first time in years, he started bringing money into the house. I was still working, but I insisted it was no longer necessary, that he could support me, that I had worked enough in my life. But I didn't stop working. Something inside me told me I couldn't depend on anyone, not even my son. Life had taught me that the only sure money is the money you earn yourself. When Michael turned 32, he met Olivia. She worked at the same company, in the human resources department. She was pretty, I can't deny that. Long hair, perfect smile, always well-dressed, and Michael fell for her like a fool. The first time he brought her home, I tried to be nice. I prepared a special dinner. I cleaned the whole house until it sparkled. I put on my best dress, even though it was old. I wanted to make a good impression. Olivia arrived in high heels, and a dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She looked at the house with those eyes that evaluate everything. I saw her gaze linger on the old furniture, on the faded curtains, on the walls that needed paint. "How?" "Cozy," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Cozy. That word people use when they don't want to say something is old or poor. During dinner, Olivia talked a lot about her family. Her father owned a hardware store. Her mother was a teacher. They had a 2-story house in a nice neighborhood. She had studied at a private university. Everything in her life seemed perfect. And then she asked me what I did for a living. I told her I cleaned houses. I saw her smile freeze for a second. I saw her glance at Michael out of the corner of her eye. I saw the judgment in her eyes. But Michael was looking at her with adoration. And I knew my opinion wasn't going to matter. So I shut up. I smiled. And I pretended everything was fine. They got married a year later. It was a small wedding. I had saved $5,000 to help with the expenses. It was all I had. I gave it to Michael with tears in my eyes. It was my gift to him, so he could start his new life right. Olivia barely thanked me. She was more worried about the photographer, the flowers, the cake. I wasn't important in that equation. After the wedding, Michael asked if they could live with me while they saved for their own house. Just for a year, he said, 2 at the most. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He was my son. And this was his house too. It always had been. The first few months were bearable. Olivia worked, I worked, Michael worked, everyone did their own thing. But slowly, I started to notice changes. Olivia began to have an opinion on everything. That the house needed remodeling, that the furniture was too old, that the curtains were depressing, that the yard was a disaster. I tried to explain to her that I didn't have money for those things, that the house was fine as it was, that the important thing was we had a roof over our heads. But she insisted. And Michael started to look at me differently, as if suddenly my house wasn't good enough, as if I wasn't good enough. One day I came home from work and found new furniture in the living room. Olivia had bought it without asking me. My old furniture was in the garage, piled up like trash. "This looks much better, doesn't it, Eleanor?" she said with that fake smile. I looked at my furniture in the garage. The sofa where I had slept so many nights when I couldn't turn on the heat and gave Michael the bed. The little table where we did his homework together. All of it was trash to her now. But I said nothing. Because Michael was there, looking at me, waiting for me to say everything was fine, that I liked the changes, that it was a good idea. And I said yes, like always. The months passed, and Olivia took more control. Now she bought the groceries. She decided what was for dinner. She invited her friends over without telling me. My house didn't feel like mine anymore. And Michael said nothing. He just worked, came home tired, ate what Olivia prepared, and went to sleep. I began to feel invisible, like a ghost in my own home. No one asked me how I was. No one included me in conversations. No one looked at me. One night, while I was washing the dishes after dinner, I heard Olivia and Michael talking in their room. The door was ajar. "We can't keep living here, Michael. This house is too small. And your mother is always here. We have no privacy." "I know, honey, but we're saving. We'll have our own house soon. And why don't we ask your mom to sell this house? We could use that money to buy something better, something bigger, in a better neighborhood." Silence, a long silence that chilled my blood. "I don't know, Olivia. This house is my mom's. She worked so hard to buy it. But you're her only son. It's going to be yours someday anyway. Why wait? I didn't hear Michael's answer. I moved away from the door, heartbroken. That night, I understood something. Olivia didn't just want me to be invisible. She wanted me to disappear completely. And the worst part was that Michael wasn't stopping her. I opened my eyes again in the darkness of my room. I was no longer the naive woman who had opened the doors of her home, believing in unconditional love. Now I knew the truth. And the truth hurt more than I ever imagined. 3 months had passed since that night I overheard the conversation between Michael and Olivia. 3 months in which I pretended to know nothing. 3 months in which I continued to be the kind mother, the one who doesn't bother anyone, the one who makes herself invisible to avoid problems. But inside, something had changed. Now I watched. Now I paid attention to every detail, to every look, to every whisper. And that's how I started to notice strange things. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home early from work. My stomach had been bothering me, and I decided to come home. When I entered, the house was silent. I thought no one was home. But then I heard voices in the study. The door was almost closed, but sounds were coming through. It was Olivia on the phone. "Yes, Dad. I already told you the house is in her name. But Michael is the only heir. It's just a matter of time. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's a simple woman. She doesn't understand these things. Of course, we'll wait as long as necessary, but in the meantime, we can start preparing the ground." I froze in the hallway. I felt the blood turn to ice in my veins. Preparing the ground? For what? Olivia kept talking, but I couldn't listen anymore. I walked softly to my room, trying not to make a sound. I closed the door and sat on the bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. They were planning something. Something that had to do with my house, with my inheritance, with my life. I didn't go down for dinner that night. I told them I felt sick, and it was true. I was sick to my soul. I stayed awake all night, thinking, trying to understand what they were plotting, and above all, trying to understand how I had gotten to this point, how my own son could be conspiring against me. The answer came faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. It was addressed to me, but Olivia opened it before I could see it. I found her in the kitchen, reading the letter with an expression I couldn't decipher. "What is that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, nothing important. Just junk mail," she said, crumpling the paper and tossing it in the trash. But something in her tone alerted me. I waited for her to leave the kitchen. Then, with my heart pounding, I pulled the paper out of the trash and smoothed it out carefully. It was a letter from the county recorder's office. A notification that information had been requested about my property. The applicant was Michael Anderson, my son. My hands trembled as I read. Why was Michael asking for information about my property? Why hadn't he said anything to me? I put the folded letter in the pocket of my apron. I later hid it in my room, in the same drawer where I kept the notebook where I was writing everything down. That night, during dinner, I watched Michael. He was normal. He talked to Olivia about his day at work. He laughed. He ate calmly, as if nothing was wrong. "Michael," I said, interrupting their conversation, "have you been to the county recorder's office lately?" I saw him tense up. It was just for a second, but I saw it. Olivia also froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "The recorder's office?" "No. Mom, why do you ask?" "Just curious." I received a strange notification. "It must be a mistake," Olivia said quickly. Too quickly. "You know how those government offices are, always sending confusing papers." I nodded slowly. I didn't say anything else. But they didn't go back to talking with the same naturalness. The rest of the dinner was tense, uncomfortable. That night, I heard voices from their room again. This time I got closer, careful not to make a sound. "I told you to be discreet," Olivia was saying. "It's annoying." I was discreet. "I don't know how she found out." "Because your mother isn't stupid, Michael. Stop underestimating her." "But she can't do anything. The house will eventually be mine. We just need patience." "I don't want to wait 30 years for her to die, Michael. We need that house now. We can sell it, buy something better, and invest the rest. It's money that's just sitting there, not moving, not generating anything." "And what do you suggest? We kick her out?" We don't kick her out. We just convince her it would be better for her to live in a smaller place. An apartment. Something she can manage on her own. We sell her the idea that it's for her own good. I felt the tears start to well up, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I needed to hear more. I don't know, Olivia. She's my mother. And that's precisely why you have to think about her future. This house is too big for her. What's she going to do when she can't climb stairs anymore? When she can't keep it clean? We're thinking of her, Michael. Of her well-being. The way Olivia manipulated words was impressive. She made stealing my house sound like an act of love. Like a favor. I moved away from the door. I had heard enough. In my room, I took out the notebook and wrote everything down. The date, the conversation, the exact words I remembered. I also took out the letter from the county recorder's office and put it in a manila envelope, along with other important papers I had started to gather. The next day, I went to the county recorder's office. I told Olivia I had a doctor's appointment. She barely paid attention to me. At the recorder's office, I asked for a certified copy of my house deed. I also asked for a history of all inquiries made about my property in the last 6 months. The clerk, an older woman named Tanya Jackson, looked at me with compassion when she reviewed the records. "Mrs. Anderson, I see your son has requested information on this property 3 times in the last 4 months. He also requested an appraisal of the property." I felt my stomach turn over. An appraisal? Yes. Usually, that's done when someone is thinking of selling or requesting a loan using the property as collateral. Can he do that without my permission? No, ma'am. As long as you are the sole registered owner, no one can sell or mortgage without your signature. But it's important that you protect your documents. Sometimes, there are cases of fraud where signatures are forged. Tanya's words hit me like a bucket of cold water. Fraud? Forgery? My own son would be capable of that? What can I do to protect myself? I asked, my voice trembling. You can put an alert on the registry. That way, any movement someone tries to make with your property, you will be notified immediately. You should also keep your original documents in a safe place, preferably outside of your home. I followed all her advice. I put the alert. I requested certified copies of everything, and I paid $50 I barely had to make sure everything was protected. When I left the recorder's office, I felt different. I was no longer just a wounded mother. Now I was a woman who was taking action. Silent, strategic, but action nonetheless. That night at dinner, Olivia announced she had found an apartment for a senior. It's in a very nice building, Eleanor. It has an elevator. It's near the medical center. And there are a lot of ladies your age there. You could make friends. She looked at me with that fake smile I knew so well. I don't need an apartment, I said calmly. I have my house. Yes, but this house is very big. And it's deteriorating more and more. Don't you think something more manageable would be better? My house is perfect. Mom, Michael chimed in, we just want what's best for you. You don't have to make a decision now, but you should at least go see the apartment. I looked at both of them, and in that moment, I had to make the biggest effort of my life not to scream, not to flip the table, not to tell them everything I knew. But I didn't, because I had learned something important. Whoever yells, loses. Whoever shows their cards first, loses. And I was not going to lose. I'll go see it, I said calmly. But I'm not promising anything. Olivia smiled, thinking she had won. Michael relaxed in his chair. But I knew the truth. I knew they were playing a dirty game. And now, I was going to play too. Only my game was going to be smarter than theirs. That night, before sleeping, I took out the notebook and wrote a phrase that Tanya had told me at the registry. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. And I was going to be very strategic. The days that followed were the loneliest of my life. Not because I was physically alone, but because I was alone in the midst of 2 people who supposedly loved me. I became a ghost in my own home. Olivia and Michael talked among themselves as if I didn't exist. They made plans. They laughed. They lived. And I just watched from my corner. Invisible. But that invisibility became my greatest advantage. I started to notice patterns. Every Tuesday, Olivia left the house around 3 in the afternoon. She said she was going to the gym, But she came back with bags from furniture stores, with home catalogs, with design magazines. She was planning a new life, a life that didn't include me. On Thursdays, Michael came home late. He said he had work meetings. But one Thursday, I followed him. I felt bad doing it, like I was a spy. But I needed to know the truth. I saw him go into a real estate office. I stood on the corner, hidden behind a pole, watching. He came out 40 minutes later with a folder full of papers. Papers he never showed me. That night, I checked his jacket while he was in the shower. I found receipts. One was for an appraisal of a house in an expensive neighborhood. $350,000. Another house, in a different neighborhood, cost $400,000. My house, according to the appraisal Michael had requested, was worth $220,000. Years had passed since I bought it for $85,000. The neighborhood had improved. The area had developed. It was now a valuable property, and they knew it. I photographed the receipts with my old cell phone. The photos came out blurry, but you could read the important parts. I put everything back exactly as I had found it. Every night, when they were asleep, I went down to the kitchen. I made myself a chamomile tea and sat in the dark, thinking, planning, trying to understand the full scope of their betrayal. One early morning, as I was sitting there, I heard footsteps. It was Michael. He came down for water. He saw me at the table and startled. "Mom, what are you doing awake?" "I can't sleep," I said simply. He stood there, uncomfortable. For a few seconds, I saw my son, the little boy he had been, the one who climbed into my bed when he had nightmares, the one who hugged me and told me I was the best mom in the world. Where was that boy now? "Are you okay?" he asked. But his voice sounded mechanical, like he was fulfilling an obligation. "I'm fine, son. Just thinking about old people things." He nodded, got his water, and left without another word. That interaction, so cold and empty, hurt me more than any of Olivia's insults. The next morning, I went to visit Ruth, my old friend, the neighbor who had helped me when Michael was little. She was 82 now, but still as sharp as ever. I told her everything. Every detail, every conversation I'd overheard, every document I'd found. Ruth listened in silence, holding my hand in hers, which were wrinkled but still warm. "Eleanor, that boy has lost his way, and that woman is pure poison," she said when I finished. "But you are smarter than both of them put together. Don't let them take what's yours." "I don't know what to do, Ruth. He's my son. I don't want to destroy him. This isn't about destroying him. It's about protecting yourself, because they are not going to stop. They are planning to steal your house, your life, your dignity, and you cannot allow it." She was right. I knew it. But accepting it was painful. "Do you have the original papers for the house?" Ruth asked. "Yes. I have them hidden in my room. Get them. I'll keep them here, in my house. They'll be safe." That same afternoon, while Olivia and Michael were at work, I went to my room and took out all the important documents. The original deed to the house. The will I had made years ago. The bank deposit slips showing I had paid for the house in full. Everything. I put them in a bag and took them to Ruth. She put them in a safe she had hidden in her closet. "They'll be safe here," she told me. "And if anything happens to you, I know what to do with them." I hugged her. It was the first time in months I felt like someone was on my side. When I got home, Olivia had already arrived. She was in the living room, talking on the phone. When she saw me, she hung up quickly. "Where were you?" she asked, as if she had a right to know. "With Ruth, my friend. That nosy old woman. I don't know why you still hang out with her." I bit my tongue. I didn't answer. I just went up to my room. That night at dinner, Olivia brought up the subject again. "Eleanor, I spoke to the owner of the apartment I mentioned. He's willing to give you a good price, $1,200 a month. And if you pay 6 months up front, he'll give you a discount." I did the math in my head. $1,200 a month. I barely earned 900 cleaning houses. How was I going to pay that? "I can't afford that," I said. "That's why we're telling you to sell this house, Mom," Michael chimed in. "With the money from the sale, you could pay for the apartment for years, and you'd have plenty left over to live comfortably." "And what would you do with my house?" "Well, we could buy it," Olivia said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We'd pay you a fair price. That way it all stays in the family. A fair price, surely far below its real value, and I would be left with nothing, while they took my assets. I don't want to sell, I said firmly. Mom, you have to be reasonable, Michael insisted. I am being perfectly reasonable, and my answer is no. The atmosphere tensed. Olivia dropped her silverware on the table with force. Michael looked at me with frustration. Fine, Olivia said with a fake smile. We won't pressure you. But think about it. There was nothing to think about. I knew exactly what they were doing. That night I couldn't sleep again. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. But then I remembered something my mother had told me before she died. Daughter, in this life there are two types of people, those who let themselves be trampled and those who learn to get up. You decide which one you want to be. I got up from the bed. I turned on the light. I took out my notebook and started to write a plan. If they wanted to play dirty, I was going to play smarter. But I needed professional help. The next morning, I searched the internet for lawyers specializing in family and property law. I found one who offered a free initial consultation. His name was Gregory Vance. I called and made an appointment. They gave me a time for Friday at 10 in the morning. Friday arrived. I told Olivia I had a doctor's appointment. She barely looked up from her phone. Mr. Vance's office was in a modest building downtown. I walked up to the third floor because the elevator was broken. When I entered, a secretary greeted me kindly. Mrs. Anderson? Yes, that's me. Mr. Vance is expecting you. Please, come in. Gregory Vance was a man in his 50s, with graying temples and a kind but serious look. He invited me to sit. Tell me, Mrs. Anderson, how can I help you? And then, for the first time, I let it all out. I told him about Olivia, about Michael, about the conversations I'd overheard, the documents I'd found, the fear I felt of losing my house. The lawyer listened without interrupting. He took notes from time to time. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Mrs. Anderson, what you're describing is a classic case of financial abuse. Unfortunately, it's more common than you think. Children who manipulate their elderly parents to get their property. What can I do? First, I need to see all the documents you have. Deeds, wills, any paper that proves you are the sole owner. Second, we are going to put additional legal protections in place. I will draft a document that prevents any sale or transfer of your property without your physical presence and identity verification before a notary. How much would all that cost? Today's consultation is free. The additional procedures would cost about $500. I know it's a lot of money, ma'am, but it's an investment to protect an asset worth over $200,000. $500. It was almost everything I had saved, but it was worth it. I'll do it, I said with determination. Perfect. Bring me the documents next week. And, Mrs. Anderson, one more thing. Don't tell anyone you came here. Not your son, not your daughter-in-law. This must be completely confidential until we have everything protected. I nodded. I left that office feeling different. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some control. That night, in my room, I opened my notebook and wrote a new entry. Today, I took the first step to protect what is mine. I am no longer the victim. Now, I am the strategist. And I closed the notebook with a certainty I hadn't felt in a long time. The war was just beginning. But now, I had weapons. The following week was a careful dance of lies and silences. Every move I made had to be calculated. Every word had to sound natural. I couldn't arouse suspicion. On Monday morning, while Olivia and Michael were eating breakfast, I announced I was going to spend the day with Ruth, that she wasn't feeling well and needed company. With that old woman again, Olivia muttered, without looking up from her phone. Michael said nothing. He didn't even pretend to be interested in my life anymore. I left the house with my old handbag. Inside, I carried all the documents Ruth had been keeping for me. The original deed, the certified copies from the registry, the receipts proving I had paid for the house in full. The walk to Mr. Vance's office felt endless. Every step seemed to weigh twice as much, not from fatigue, but from the weight of what I was doing. I was taking legal action against my own son, but there was no turning back. When I got to the office, the lawyer was waiting for me. I spread the documents on his desk like cards in a poker game, and in a way they were. Gregory reviewed them one by one, carefully, taking notes. He would nod or frown occasionally. I waited in silence, my sweaty hands in my lap. Mrs. Anderson, these documents are solid. You are the sole registered owner. There is no ambiguity. The house is yours and yours alone. I felt a small sense of relief, but he continued. However, there is something that worries me. Your son has been making very specific inquiries at the registry, not just about the property value, but also about transfer processes. This tells me he's looking for ways to facilitate a transition. What does that mean? It means he's likely consulting with someone on how to convince you to sign over the property, or worse, how to forge your signature. The words hit me like stones. Forge my signature, my own son. Can he do that? Is that legal? No, it's not legal at all. It's fraud. And if they try it, there could be criminal consequences. But, Mrs. Anderson, by the time the fraud is discovered, the damage would already be done. It could take years to reverse a fraudulent transfer. So what do? We are going to armor plate your property. First, I am going to draft a property protection deed. It's a document that gets registered, stating that any transfer of your property must be done with your physical presence before a notary, with identity verification, and with an independent witness designated by you. And that's enough? It's a very important first step. I am also going to formally notify the county recorder's office that you have placed a fraud alert. This means if anyone tries to make any move with your property, you will be contacted immediately via 3 different methods: certified mail, phone call, and email. I don't have an email. Then we are going to create one right now. It's important you have all the tools to stay informed. We spent the next hour setting up an email account on my old cell phone. Gregory was patient, explaining every step as if teaching a child. But it didn't offend me. I needed to learn. Now, Mrs. Anderson, there's one more thing I need to ask. Have you made a will? Yes, 5 years ago. I left everything to Michael. He's my only son. I understand. But given the current circumstances, have you considered modifying that will? The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. Modifying my will meant fully accepting that my son had betrayed me. It meant closing a door that a part of me still wanted to keep open. I don't know if I can do that, I said, my voice breaking. You don't have to decide now, but think about it. A will can be changed at any time, and you can include protection clauses, conditions, or even designate other people or organizations. I nodded, though I felt a deep pain inside. Had it really come to this? Considering disinheriting my own son? The documents will be ready in 3 days, Gregory continued. The total cost, as I mentioned, is $500. That includes all the paperwork, registering the property protection, and 3 follow-up consultations. I took an envelope of crumpled bills from my purse. It was 6 months' worth of savings from cleaning houses. $500, counted out one by one. It hurt to hand it over, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented. Hours of work, floors scrubbed, toilets cleaned, all to protect myself from my own family. I'll be back on Thursday, I said, taking the receipt he gave me. When I left the office, the sun was high. I walked a few blocks aimlessly, trying to process everything. I needed time before going home, time to pull myself together, to put on the mask of the mother who knew nothing. I sat on a park bench. There were children playing, mothers watching them, a scene so normal it hurt to see. I remembered when Michael was little, and I used to bring him to this very park, how he would run, and I would run after him. How he laughed when I pushed him on the swings. When did it all break? An older woman sat down next to me. She had a bag of bread and started feeding the pigeons. "Are you all right, honey?" she asked, though she was probably younger than me. "Just resting," I lied. "Sometimes the exhaustion isn't in the body, it's in the soul," she said wisely. "And that's the hardest kind to heal." She was right. My soul was tired. When I finally returned home, it was mid-afternoon. Olivia was in the living room, watching television. She didn't even greet me when I came in. I went up to my room and put the lawyer's receipt in the bottom of my drawer, under my underwear. No one would look there. The next 3 days were torture. I had to act normal while inside I was counting the hours until I could go back to the lawyer. On Wednesday night, I heard another conversation. This time, it wasn't an accident. I intentionally stood near their room after they thought I was asleep. I already spoke to the notary, Michael was saying. He says if we can get her to sign a power of attorney, we can do the transfer without much trouble. And how do we convince her to sign that? We tell her it's for bank procedures, that she needs to update her information at the bank for security, something like that. She doesn't understand that stuff. It has to be soon, Michael. Your mother is acting strange lately. Like she suspects something. She's paranoid. She's always been like that. Those words shattered me. Paranoid. That's what my son called me now. Not worried, not smart, paranoid. I went back to my room, heartbroken but more determined than ever. I took out my notebook and wrote down every word I'd heard. Date, time, witnesses, none, just me. But it was evidence all the same. Thursday finally came. I went back to the lawyer's office under the pretext of another visit to Ruth. Gregory had all the documents ready. He explained each one to me patiently. The property protection deed, the notification to the registry, the fraud alert. It was all there, on official paper, with stamps and signatures. Now, Mrs. Anderson, I need you to sign here, here, and here. But read it all first. It's important you understand every word. I read every line. It was complicated legal language, but Gregory explained it in simple terms. Basically, I was creating a shield around my property, a shield that not even my son could penetrate without my explicit and verifiable consent. I signed with a trembling hand. Each signature felt like a betrayal of Michael, but it also felt like an act of self-love, of survival. These documents will be registered today, Gregory said. By tomorrow afternoon, they will be in the system. Your property will be protected. And what if they try something before then? Then we will have evidence of attempted fraud, but I doubt they'll act that quickly. From what you've told me, they are planning this carefully. They're going to try to manipulate you first. He was right. And I would be ready. I left the office with a copy of all the documents in my bag. I stopped by Ruth's house and left another copy with her. She stored them with the originals. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor, she said, hugging me. I know it hurts, but this is about protecting yourself. When I got home, Olivia and Michael were eating dinner. They looked at me as I walked in. How's Ruth? Michael asked, without much interest. Better. She just needed some company. Eleanor, we need to talk, Olivia said suddenly. I felt my blood run cold. Did they know something? Had they followed me? About what? About your financial security. Michael and I were thinking it would be a good idea for you to update your bank information. For security. There's a lot of fraud going on lately. There it was, exactly as I had heard them plan. The power of attorney disguised as help. Oh, I said, trying to sound casual. What do I need to do? Just sign a few papers. We'll take care of the rest. Let me think about it, I said. I'm tired. We'll talk tomorrow. I saw the frustration in Olivia's eyes, but she couldn't press further without raising suspicion. I went up to my room. I locked the door, and for the first time in months, I smiled. They thought they were hunting me, but they didn't know I had already escaped the trap. And more than that, I was preparing my own net. I took out my notebook and wrote a single sentence. The protection is activated. Now I just have to wait for them to show their true intentions. And I would wait, patiently, intelligently, and with all the strength a betrayed mother can have when she finally decides to fight back. The days that followed were a constant performance. Every morning I got up and went down to breakfast as if nothing had changed, as if I didn't know what they were planning, as if I were still the naive mother they thought I was. But inside, everything had changed. Now I had a secret, an invisible shield they couldn't see, and that protection gave me a strange sense of power in the midst of the pain. Olivia insisted several more times about the bank papers. Each time she mentioned it, I made different excuses. That I was tired, that I didn't feel well, that I'd do it next week. I could see her getting more and more frustrated. But she couldn't force me without revealing her true intentions. One afternoon, while I was in my room, I heard Olivia talking on the phone in the living room. She was talking loud enough for me to hear, though she probably didn't realize it. "No, Dad, the old woman is being difficult. She doesn't want to sign anything." "Yes, I know we have to be patient, but we've been at this for months." "No, Michael is too soft on her. He doesn't dare to really pressure her." The old woman. That's what she called me when she thought I wasn't listening. She didn't even bother to use my name anymore. I walked down the stairs silently. Olivia saw me and hung up immediately. "Do you need something, Eleanor?" she asked with that fake smile. "I'm just going to make some tea," I said calmly. "In the kitchen." I filled the kettle with water and put it on the stove. As I waited for it to boil, I looked out the window. The garden I had planted years ago was neglected. The flowers I loved so much were dry. No one watered them anymore. No one took care of the things that mattered to me. But it wasn't just the garden that was dying. It was my whole life in this house. I made my tea and went back to my room. From the window, I could see Ruth's house. Knowing she had my documents, that someone else knew the truth, gave me a little peace. That night at dinner, Michael announced something that chilled my blood. "Mom, Olivia and I were thinking. We need to make some repairs to the house. Important repairs." "What kind of repairs?" "The roof is leaking. The pipes are old. The electrical wiring is dangerous. These are things that can't wait." I looked at the ceiling. There were no leaks. The pipes worked perfectly. The electricity had never been a problem. "I haven't noticed any problems," I said. "Because you don't understand these things, Mom. But I hired an inspector, and he says urgent work needs to be done. We're talking about almost $15,000 in repairs." $15,000. A huge and convenient number. "And where would we get that money?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That's why we're telling you to sell the house," Olivia interjected. "It makes no sense to invest $15,000 in repairs for such an old house. We're better off selling, buying something new, and avoiding all these problems." There it was again. The same speech, the same trap disguised as help. "Let me think about it," I said. Though there was nothing to think about. "There isn't much time to think, Mom. The inspector says if we don't fix the roof soon, it could collapse." It was a lie. All of it was a lie. But they said it with such conviction that anyone less alert would have believed them. I got up from the table without finishing my food. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." In my room, I took out my notebook and wrote it all down. The new intimidation tactic, the fake $15,000, the invented repairs. It was all recorded, with the date and time. The following days were worse. Olivia started acting as if she already owned the house. She invited her friends over without telling me. She moved my things. One day, I came down and found she had taken all the family photos off the walls. She had replaced them with modern paintings that probably cost more than I earned in a month. "Where are my family's pictures?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I put them in a box in the garage. They were very old and faded. They gave the house a sad look. A sad look. My memories, my history, my life, all reduced to a sad look." I went to the garage and found the box. It was tossed in a corner, among tools and old junk. I opened it with trembling hands. There they were. My wedding photo, Michael as a baby, my mother. All piled up like trash. I took them out carefully and carried them to my room. I placed them on my dresser. If I couldn't have them on the walls of the house, at least I would have them in my space. But the photos weren't the worst part. The worst part came a week later. I got home from work on a Tuesday afternoon and found Olivia with an unknown couple in the living room. They were looking at the house, opening closets, checking the rooms. "Who are these people?" I asked. "Oh, Eleanor, this is Mr. and Mrs. Miller. They're interested in buying a house in this area. I was just showing them ours so they could see the potential. This house is not for sale." "Not yet," Olivia said with a smile. "But it will be soon. We're just getting a head start on the process." The Millers looked uncomfortable. They clearly didn't know I was the owner and that I hadn't authorized any of this. "Excuse me," I said directly to them, "but there has been a misunderstanding. I am the owner of this house, and it is not for sale. Not now, not soon, not ever." Olivia's face turned red with anger, but she couldn't say anything in front of strangers. The Millers apologized and left quickly. When the door closed, Olivia exploded. Why did you do that? You just scared them off. They were willing to pay $250,000 in cash. Because this house is not for sale. And you have no right to show it as if it's yours. This house is going to be ours. Why don't you get that? Michael is your only son. Everything you have will be his eventually. Eventually. When I die. But guess what, Olivia? I'm still alive. And as long as I'm alive, this house is mine. It was the first time I had ever answered her like that. The first time I had let out some of the rage I'd been saving up. Olivia looked at me with pure hatred. A hatred she didn't even try to hide anymore. You're selfish. A selfish old woman who doesn't think about her son's future. Thinking about my son is exactly what I've done my entire life. But not anymore. Now I'm going to think about me. I went up to my room, shaking with anger and pain. I closed the door and collapsed on the bed. The tears finally came. I cried for everything, for the betrayal, for the loss, for the son I had loved and who was now a stranger. That night, Michael knocked on my door. Mom, we need to talk. I have nothing to talk to you about. Please. Open the door. I opened the door. My son was standing there, but I didn't recognize him anymore. Mom, Olivia went too far today. I'm sorry, but you have to understand, we're just trying to help you. Help me? By bringing strangers into my house without my permission? By trying to sell my property without my consent? That's helping? We're thinking about the future. About all of us. No, Michael. You're thinking about yourselves. Only yourselves. I don't exist in your plans, except as an obstacle you have to remove. That's not true, Mom. Then tell me, when was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you looked at me like your mother and not like a problem to be solved? He was silent, because he had no answer. That's what I thought, I said, and I closed the door in his face. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, looking at the photos I had rescued from the garage. Michael as a baby. Michael as a child. Michael graduating. Where was that boy now? At what point had I lost him? The next morning, while they were sleeping, I went down and found Olivia's cell phone on the kitchen table. She had left it charging, and it didn't have a password. I know it was wrong. I know invading someone's privacy isn't right. But I needed to know how far this went. I opened her messages. There was a group chat with her friends. I read in horror. Girls, I can't stand this old woman anymore. She's so stubborn. She doesn't get that we're doing her a favor. Why don't you just put her in a nursing home? My aunt did that with her mother-in-law. Problem solved. I've thought about it. But Michael is too soft. He still has that good son complex. Give him time. With a little more pressure, he'll give in. I kept reading. There were photos of houses they wanted to buy. There were calculations of how much money they would have after selling my property. There were complete plans for a life they would build on the ashes of mine. I photographed everything with my phone. Every message, every picture, every poisonous word. When I was done, I left the phone exactly where I had found it and went back to my room. That evidence was added to my collection, to the notebook, to the documents, to the recordings I had started making of their conversations. They thought I was stupid, that I was weak, that I didn't know how to use technology, that I didn't understand what they were doing. They were wrong. I understood perfectly, and I was documenting every single step. Because I knew the day would come when all that evidence would be necessary. The day I would have to show the world who Michael and Olivia really were. And that day was getting closer. The moment came in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It was silent and cold, like everything I had been planning for months. It was a Friday afternoon. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. I went to open it and found a man in a suit holding a briefcase. Mrs. Eleanor Anderson? Yes, that's me. I am Robert Fields, a notary public. Your son Michael hired me to handle a property transfer. He asked me to come by today for you to sign the documents. I felt my blood run cold, but I stayed calm. This was the final proof I needed. A property transfer? Yes, ma'am. The documents to transfer this house into your son's name. He told me you were already in agreement and that only your signature was needed. May I see the documents? The notary opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder. It was the transfer papers. Everything was prepared. Only my signature was needed for me to lose my house. At that moment, Michael and Olivia came down the stairs. They had been waiting upstairs, ready to witness my defeat. "Mom, this is the notary we talked about," Michael said, with a smile that tried to be reassuring. "You just have to sign here and here. It's a quick formality. A quick formality to take my house from me." "It's not taking anything, Mom. It's just putting the house in my name. But you'll keep living here. Nothing will change." I looked at my son, at this man who had grown in my womb, who had nursed from my breast, whom I had raised alone with all the love in the world, and I saw him clearly for the first time. He was no longer my son. He was a stranger, moved by greed. "Mr. Fields," I said, my voice firm, "are you aware that I never authorized this transfer? That I never asked for this procedure?" The notary became uncomfortable. "Your son told me you were in agreement, that this was something you had discussed as a family." He lied. "I have never agreed to this, and I am not signing anything." "Mom, don't be ridiculous," Olivia interjected. "We've talked about this 1,000 times. It's for your own good." "My own good would be if you two stopped trying to rob me." "It's not robbery. He's your son," Olivia shouted, finally losing her composure. "Mr. Fields," I continued, ignoring Olivia, "I want you to know that this house is protected by a property protection deed, registered with the Public County Recorder's Office. Any attempt to transfer it without my explicit and verifiable consent is fraud, and it is documented." I saw the color drain from Michael's face. The notary began to shuffle his papers nervously. "Property protection. Mr. Anderson, you mentioned nothing about that." "Because he didn't know," I said. "Because I did it in secret. Because I knew this was going to happen." I took a copy of the document Mr. Vance had registered from my pocket. I handed it to the notary. He read it with growing attention. "Mrs. Anderson is correct. This property has very specific legal protections. I cannot proceed with this transfer without additional verifications that were not provided to me. Mr. Anderson, you gave me incomplete information." "Wait, there must be a mistake," Michael said, sweating. "There is no mistake," I replied. "What there is an attempt at fraud, and it's documented. I have recordings, I have messages, I have witnesses, I have everything." Olivia looked at me with pure hatred. "You damned old woman, you were spying on us." "I was protecting myself. What's the difference?" The notary closed his briefcase quickly. "Folks, I cannot be a part of this. If there are family disputes, you must resolve them through other channels. I will not risk my license. Good day." And he left, leaving Michael and Olivia standing in the living room, defeated. There was a heavy silence. Then Michael finally spoke. "Mom, it didn't have to be this way." "You're right, it didn't. You two decided it would be this way. You decided to see me as an obstacle instead of a mother. You decided to conspire to steal what it took me a lifetime to earn." "We weren't going to steal it. It was still going to be yours," Michael yelled. "Lies." I read Olivia's messages to her friends. "I know that as soon as the house was in your name, you were going to put me in a nursing home or force me to leave. I know everything, Michael. Everything." Olivia stepped forward, her fists clenched. "And what are you going to do? Call the police? Report your own son?" "I'm not going to do anything. You are. You are going to leave my house, today." "What?" Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You heard me. I want you to pack your things and leave. This is my house, and you are no longer welcome here." "You can't just kick us out like this," Olivia said. "We have rights. We've lived here for years." "You have no rights. You never paid rent. You never contributed anything. You only planned to rob me. And now, you're leaving." "Mom, please," Michael begged. "We have nowhere to go." Those words almost broke me. Almost. Because for a moment, I saw the little boy he had been. But then I remembered everything. The conversations I'd heard. The messages I'd read. The transfer documents they had just tried to make me sign. "You should have thought of that before. You have until noon tomorrow to be gone." "This is abuse!" Olivia screamed. "You're a horrible mother." A horrible mother who worked 3 jobs to give her son everything. A horrible mother who sacrificed her whole life so he could have an education. A horrible mother who bought this house to give him security. Yes, Olivia, I'm horrible for not letting myself be robbed. I went up to my room and locked the door. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so hard I felt it would burst. But I had done it. I had finally told the truth. I had finally defended myself. I heard screaming downstairs. I heard things breaking. I heard Olivia cursing. I heard Michael crying. But I didn't go down. I didn't open the door. I sat on my bed, hugging an old photo of Michael as a baby, crying silently. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to them packing. I heard drawers opening and closing. I heard arguments. I heard the entire process of their departure. The next morning, when I came out of my room, they were gone. They had left the keys on the kitchen table. No note, no explanation. They just left. I walked through the empty house. Their room was wrecked. They had left trash everywhere. Clothes they didn't want. Broken furniture. It was their final act of revenge. To destroy what they couldn't take. I sat in the living room and looked around. The house felt different, bigger, quieter. And for the first time in years, mine. I called Ruth. She came over immediately. "You did it," she said, hugging me. "I'm so proud of you." I don't feel pride. I just feel pain. The pain is part of healing. But you did the right thing. We spent the day cleaning the house, picking up the wreckage Michael and Olivia had left behind. It was like clearing the rubble after a war. When we finished, Ruth made me tea. "And now what?" she asked. "Now, I live. For the first time in years. I live just for me." But I knew it wasn't over. Michael and Olivia wouldn't give up that easily. This was just the beginning of something bigger. And I was right. 3 days later, I received a certified letter. It was a lawsuit. Michael was suing me for wrongful eviction and emotional damages. He was asking for $50,000 in compensation. I read the letter and I couldn't help but laugh. A bitter laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. My son, to whom I had given everything, was suing me. I called Mr. Vance. "Mrs. Anderson, don't worry. This lawsuit has no merit. You have every right to decide who lives in your house, and we have all the evidence of what they tried to do. What do we do?" Now comes the best part. We countersue for attempted fraud, for conspiracy to commit financial fraud. And we are going to win. And so the legal battle began. A battle I had not wanted, but one I was prepared to fight, because I was no longer the woman who stayed silent. I was no longer the mother who accepted everything out of love. Now I was a woman who knew her worth, and I was not going to let anyone, not even my own son, take it away from me. The war had begun, but this time, I had the weapons. The following months were like living in a constant storm. Mr. Vance filed the countersuit, and everything became official. It was no longer just a family conflict. Now it was a legal case. Michael and Olivia hired a lawyer, a young, aggressive man named Anthony Cole. They began to spread their version of the story, that I was a cruel mother, that I had thrown them out on the street for no reason, that I was senile and didn't know what I was doing. The first hearing was devastating. I had to sit in a cold room in front of my son and listen to his lawyer describe me as a mentally unstable, paranoid woman, incapable of making rational decisions. My client only wanted to help his mother, Michael's lawyer said, but she misinterpreted his intentions and violently expelled them from the home. Violently. As if I had used physical force. As if they hadn't been the ones to destroy the room before they left. Then Gregory, my lawyer, spoke. He presented the recordings, the text messages from Olivia's phone, the documents proving Michael had tried to transfer my property without my consent, the statement from the notary, Mr. Fields, confirming that Michael had given him false information. I watched Michael's face turn red, watched Olivia look away. The truth was coming out, and they couldn't hide. The judge, an older woman named Judge Catherine Ross, reviewed all the evidence with a serious expression. "This is very serious," she said finally. "What I see here is a clear attempt at fraudulent appropriation of property. Mr. Anderson, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Michael stood up, tears in his eyes. Your Honor, I just wanted to secure the future. My mother is getting older, and I thought it would be better if I managed her assets. I never intended to harm her, and that's why you attempted a property transfer behind her back? Without informing the notary of the existing legal protections? Michael didn't know what to say. The judge continued. I am going to be clear. Mr. Anderson's lawsuit is dismissed. There is no legal basis to claim damages when the eviction was justified. Furthermore, I am ordering an investigation into possible fraud. This hearing is suspended until that investigation is complete. I left the courtroom feeling a strange mix of relief and pain. I had won this battle, but it was still a war against my own son. Outside the courthouse, Olivia was waiting for me. She approached with fury in her eyes. This isn't over, you old woman. We're going to appeal. We're going to fight until that house is ours. The house will never be yours, Olivia. Never. Michael is your only son. Everything you have belongs to him by right. By right of being a son, perhaps, but not by right of being a thief. I walked away before she could answer. There was no point in talking to her anymore. The following weeks were a media nightmare. Olivia started posting on social media. Old photos of her and Michael with messages about ungrateful mothers. Fabricated stories about how I had mistreated them. Posts asking for support and sympathy. My mother-in-law threw us out on the street without mercy. After years of caring for her and helping her, this is how she repays us. Appearances are deceiving. Not all mothers are saints. Her friends shared the posts. Strangers commented horrible things about me. They called me a monster, heartless, a bad mother. Ruth showed me some of the posts on her phone. I didn't have social media, but she did. Don't pay them any mind, Eleanor. The people who matter know the truth. But it hurt. Every comment was like a stab. To see my name being dragged through the mud. To see my son allow his wife to defame me publicly. Then Gregory had an idea. Mrs. Anderson, we need to tell your side of the story. Officially, with all the evidence. How? I know a journalist. He does investigative reports on family fraud. If you agree, we can give him access to all the documentation. He will write an article with the complete truth. I hesitated at first. I didn't want more publicity. But then I thought of all the other older women who were probably going through the same thing, who were being manipulated by their own children, who didn't know how to defend themselves. Let's do it, I said finally. The journalist's name was David Pierce. He was a man in his 40s, serious but kind. He came to my house with a recorder and a notebook. I told him everything. From the beginning. How I had worked my whole life. How I bought the house. How Michael had changed after marrying Olivia. The conversations I'd heard. The documents I'd found. Everything. I showed him my notebook with all the entries. The photos of Olivia's messages, the recordings, the receipts from the county recorder's office, all the evidence I had gathered for months. David listened in silence, taking notes. He occasionally shook his head in disbelief. Mrs. Anderson, this is more common than people think. But you did something few elderly people do. You fought back. You documented everything. You took legal action. I had no other choice. There are always choices. Many people choose to stay silent out of fear or shame. You chose to fight. The article was published 2 weeks later. It was titled, The Silent Theft, How Children Are Dispossessing Their Parents of Their Assets. It was devastating. David had included the whole story, with names changed to protect privacy, but with all the details. The messages from Olivia talking about putting me in a nursing home. Michael's request to the county recorder's office. The fraudulent transfer attempt with the notary. It was all there. The article went viral. Thousands of people shared it. Hundreds commented with their own similar stories. Mothers and fathers who were being dispossessed by greedy children. And then, the real collapse of Michael and Olivia began. The company where they both worked saw the article. Even with false names, some colleagues recognized the details. The story reached HR. They were both called in for explanations. Michael was suspended temporarily while the company investigated whether he had used company resources for his plans. Olivia was fired immediately for violating the code of ethics. Their friends began to pull away. The same people who had commented on their posts in support now deleted them. No one wanted to be associated with someone who had tried to steal from their elderly mother-in-law. The apartment they were living in was expensive. Without their jobs, they couldn't pay the rent. They had to move to a smaller, cheaper place on the outskirts of town. I found out about all this from Ruth, who had a cousin who knew someone who had seen them. I wasn't looking for information about them, but the news arrived anyway. Michael tried to contact me several times. Calls I didn't answer, messages I deleted without reading. One time he came and knocked on my door. I saw him through the window, but I didn't open it. "Mom, please, we need to talk," he yelled from outside. But I didn't go down. I had nothing to talk to him about. He finally left a letter under the door. I picked it up with trembling hands and read it. "Mom, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I'm still your son. You can't shut the door on me forever. I lost my job. Olivia is sick with nerves. We're going through a very difficult time. We need you. We need you." Those 3 words that once would have made me run to help them now only produced a bitter laugh. They needed me now that they had nothing. They needed me now that they had lost everything. But when I needed them, when I needed respect and dignity in my own home, they weren't there. I put the letter in my drawer with all the other evidence. I didn't answer it. One afternoon, Mr. Vance called me with news. "Mrs. Anderson, the prosecutor has decided not to press criminal charges against your son. He feels that with the loss of his job and the public exposure, he has suffered enough consequences. But the property protection order remains in place permanently. That means it's over? Legally, yes. He cannot try anything with your property ever again. It's all protected. And if he does try, then he will face criminal charges." I hung up the phone, feeling an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. The legal battle was over. But the emotional battle continued. Because every night, before I went to sleep, I still saw Michael's face as a child. I still remembered how he hugged me, how he told me he loved me, and those memories hurt more than any betrayal. One evening, I was sitting in the living room drinking my tea when someone knocked on the door. I looked out the window and saw Michael, alone, without Olivia. He looked different, thinner, older, defeated. For a moment, I almost opened the door, almost let my little boy in to comfort him. But then I remembered everything, and the door stayed closed. Michael stood outside for almost an hour, waiting, crying, begging. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, forgive me." But I didn't open it, because forgiving didn't mean forgetting, and it definitely didn't mean trusting again. When he finally left, I sat in the dark, crying silently. I had won my house. I had protected my assets. I had defended my dignity, but I had lost my son, and that loss was never going to heal completely. 6 months have passed since that night Michael stood at my door. 6 months of silence, 6 months of rebuilding. The house feels different now, calmer. There's no tension in the air. No more looks filled with contempt. No more whispered conspiracies behind closed doors. I put the photos back up on the walls. All the ones Olivia had piled in the garage. My wedding. Michael as a baby. My mother. My history is back where it belongs. I redid the garden. I planted new flowers. Roses. Jasmine. Gardenias. Every morning I go out to water them with my cup of coffee in hand. It's my moment of peace. Ruth comes to visit me every afternoon. We drink chamomile tea and talk about everything and nothing. She was my only ally when everything fell apart. And now, she's my best company. Mr. Vance officially closed the case last month. All the documents are in order. My house is protected. No one can touch it without my explicit consent. I drew up a new will. The house will go to an organization that helps elderly women in situations of family abuse. Michael will receive nothing. That decision cost me nights of crying. But it was necessary. Because a son who tries to rob you does not deserve your inheritance. Michael still tries to contact me. Once a month, approximately. A text, a letter, a call I don't answer. Always saying the same thing. That he's sorry, that he made a mistake, that Olivia manipulated him. But he never tells the whole truth. He never admits that he also wanted to take my house, that he also conspired, that he chose to stay silent when she humiliated me. The last letter I received was different. He told me he had separated from Olivia, that she had left him for another man with money, that he was now completely alone and without a stable job, and he asked to come back. He begged for a second chance. He promised everything would be different. I read the letter sitting in my armchair, the same armchair where I nursed him, where I patched up his scraped knees, where I read him stories before bed. And I cried. I cried for the son I had, for the boy I loved with all my being, for the man he could have been and chose not to be. But I didn't answer the letter, because some doors, once closed, must stay that way. One afternoon, while I was watering my flowers, I saw a young woman in the street. She was holding a little boy's hand. The boy tripped, and she lifted him up with so much love in her eyes that I felt a pang in my chest. That's how I used to look at Michael. With that same unconditional love, with that same certainty that I would do anything for him. And I did. I gave everything. I sacrificed everything. I worked until my hands bled. I saved every cent. I built a future for him. But he saw it as weakness, as something he could exploit. That was his choice, not mine. I went inside the house and made myself a tea. I sat by the window looking at my garden. The flowers I had planted were growing beautifully, strong, resilient, like me. Ruth arrived a little later with some pastries she had baked. "How are you today, Eleanor?" "At peace," I replied. And it was true. Did Michael write again? Yes. But it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't hurt? Of course it hurts. It will always hurt. But the pain doesn't paralyze me anymore. It doesn't define me. Ruth nodded wisely. You did the right thing. Protecting yourself doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you a strong woman. That night, before sleeping, I took out my notebook, the same one where I had documented every betrayal, every lie, every plan they had against me. And I wrote one last entry. Today, I close this chapter. Not with hate, but with acceptance. I lost my son, but I found myself. I learned that self-love is not selfishness, that defending yourself is not cruelty, that saying no is an act of dignity. Michael chose greed over love. He chose Olivia over his mother. He chose money over family. And those were his choices, not mine. I chose to survive. I chose to fight. I chose not to be a victim. This house is mine. My life is mine. My peace is mine. And no one, ever again, will take it from me. I closed the notebook and put it in the drawer. I didn't need it anymore. The war was over. And I had won. It wasn't money that won. It wasn't the property that won. It wasn't revenge that won. I won something much more valuable. I won my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live in peace in the house I built with my own hands. I lay down in my bed, in my room, in my house. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in years, I slept deeply. Without nightmares, without fear, without guilt. Because I had learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. That loving a son doesn't mean letting him destroy you. That being a mother doesn't mean being a slave. That sacrifice has limits. And that sometimes the greatest act of love is to close a door, not out of hate, but out of self-love. This is my victory. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge. I just needed truth, patience, and the strength to say enough. And that was sufficient. The door is closed. My garden is blooming. My tea is hot. And I, Eleanor Anderson, at 67 years old, am finally living for me. This is my justice. Silent, dignified, powerful, and it is more than enough.